Hello and welcome back to iPad Lettering. My name is Karen and I'm here to help you get the most out of your iPad, whether that is with lettering or art or journaling. I hope you're doing really well wherever you are in the world. It's almost Valentine's Day, and Valentine's Day is a very special day in our family because it's my brother's birthday. So I thought we could make this cute watercolor doodles greeting card together. You will learn how to create that beautiful watercolor background, the lettering, and then also the doodles. The canvas that we are going to use for our greeting card is 2048 pixels wide, and it's going to be 2560 pixels high. We're going to use the IPL Florals painting brushes, and the first thing we need to do is create a watercolor texture background. I'm going to use the IPL watercolor paper brush, and the opacity is going to be 40%, and then the size is going to be set to the max. Of course, we also need a color palette, and the color palette that I'm going to use today is called IPL Valentine. I've made this color palette specifically for this video, and you can get it for free from my website. I'm going to leave a link in the description of this video, and then all the other things that I'm going to use in today's video, of course, there's going to be links in the description of that video. We're going to select that black color, and then we're just going to paint in the background like this. And so now what we need to do is set the blend mode of this layer to multiply. And then we need to make sure that this layer is always going to stay at the top of our layers panel. So when you add new layers, make sure that you add them below our textures layer. In order to prevent painting on it, I recommend that you lock it, and then you're not accidentally going to overwrite this. We can also make some new layers, and now we are ready to start painting. We're going to turn on the drawing guide, and we're going to set it up to make it a little bit easier to paint in our watercolor squares. We're going to increase the grid size so that we have 9 tiles visible, and the size I have here is 622 pixels. And then you want to align this in the center so that you can have the 9 squares available like this. And now we're going to start painting. We're going to use the IPL watercolor leaves for this. And then what you might like to do is pull off that color palette from that menu here, and then you can put it to your side. So you have all the colors right next to you, which is super handy. The way that I've set up this palette is so that you can use one color after the next. And then you can create the exact same theme that I'm painting today. So we're going to start with this eggplant color here, and then we are going to draw a square. And you don't want to use too much pressure, you just want to create the outline of the square to start with, and then without lifting your Apple Pencil off the screen, we're now going to fill in this square. And you'll notice when you put more pressure on your brush, the texture becomes a little bit lighter, and it'll reveal that beautiful watercolor texture of the brush. Then we're going to use the next color, and we're going to repeat the process. We're going to paint in the square, not using too much pressure, but then to fill in the square, we're going to add some more pressure and create this beautiful watercolor texture. Zoom in a little bit here so that you can see the beautiful texture that this brush creates, and this is exactly what we're looking for. If you're struggling to achieve this look in your brush, make sure that you press reasonably hard on the screen so that it really brings out that texture. And then in order to make the edges a little bit darker, take the pressure off your brush and then just go over the edge very lightly without ever lifting the Apple Pencil off your screen. You'll also notice that the darker the color, the more pronounced the texture becomes. So definitely make sure that you're experimenting with different colors and different hues to figure out which one works best. The composition here has a variety of different colors, some lighter ones, some darker ones, and I think it looks really nice that we have all these different colors together. Alright, so now we don't need our guidelines anymore, so we can turn them off. And the next thing we want to do is resize our squares into rectangles. So we're going to use the arrow tool. And then with that free form selected, we can now shrink the size of the squares into rectangles like this. And then you might also like to make this ever so slightly smaller and then align it into the center of the page. You can turn on that snapping tool, and that makes it much easier to place your composition in the center of the page like this. Now we are going to create a new layer, and we're going to set that blend mode of the layer to overlay. And then we're going to select the black color, and we're going to change to brush. We're going to choose the iPadlettering wet on wet brush, and now we're going to intensify our watercolors a little bit. So now what we're going to do is go over the edges of the shapes, and now we can add in some more watercolor effects, and this looks so cool. With this brush, the harder you press down, the more color gets added to the page, and then when you take the pressure off, you can then smudge out the colors on the page right then and there. I really like creating these dark edges and then make the colors lighter towards the center of our shape. And now we're going to do the same thing again. We're going to go all the way around, and we're going to add those shadows to our watercolor shapes. And now if we compare this to the way it was before, you'll see how much more vibrant the colors become and how much more intensified the watercolor look becomes. Now if you feel that this is a little bit too intense, or you want to change it a little bit, you can now use the smudge tool. And you can also use the iPadlettering wet on wet brush to smudge this out. This creates a really, really cool effect. And you can further improve the texture of your watercolor shapes. And now it's time to add our letters and our doodles, and I recommend that you create a sketch first. Of course you can paint straight on your watercolor shapes, but I find it much easier to create a sketch first, and then you can choose any of your favorite sketching brushes. The HB pencil that comes standard with Procreate is in the sketching section of your brush library. It's always a good choice, so let's use this one. So now I'm just very lightly sketching in the letters to start with. It doesn't have to be precise. This is really just to get a feel for the size of the letters, and then also the style of lettering that we want to use for this. And then we're also going to sketch out the doodles. In the middle here, I want to create a heart with a ribbon. And so I'm just going to do a very, very rough sketch here. It doesn't have to be very precise. It's really more about the positioning and the rough shape. And then here I thought it would be cute to add some balloons. And then of course we need a bunch of roses for our Valentine greeting card, and maybe even some single roses here as well, so we can draw some cute roses here. And then maybe here at the bottom we're just going to add some little berries. And of course they're a little bit hard to see, but I'm going to show you how we can improve this in the next step. Alright, so then once you're happy with your sketch, we're going to create a new layer, and we're going to decrease the opacity of the sketching layer. And so now we can start filling in our shapes. Here I'm going to change my color to white. And then for the letters, I'm going to use the IPL Textured Leaves brush, and the size I have here is 5%. And so now it's really just a matter of tracing your sketch and then painting in these letters. I really, really like this lettering style. I really like the thickness of it, and these slab serifs here look really nice. You'll see that the brush is not 100% opaque, but I really think this adds to the appeal of using this brush because it creates this painterly feel, and you can see the layers underneath, almost as if you had painted this with real watercolor on paper. And of course you can make this as opaque or as translucent as you want. And so I'm very happy just to leave it a little bit translucent in certain places. Now, if you find yourself struggling with the shape of the O, definitely feel free to turn the canvas around to make it more comfortable to create even lines. Or if that is not quite enough, you can also use the warp tool. Tap on warp and then turn on the advanced mesh so that you have quite fine-grained control over the shape of your O, and then you can even out those little imperfections. But remember, this is a doodle, so it doesn't have to be absolutely perfect. You'll also notice that I'm painting all of these letters on separate layers. This makes it much easier to rearrange the letters if needed. Alright, so we're going to create a new layer. We're going to change to that black color. And now for the doodles, you can choose any of your favorite doodling brushes. Coincidentally, I've got a lettering brush that I really, really love for doodles, which is called IPL Love Letters. So this is the brush I'm going to use for my doodles. It creates a little bit of an irregular shape, but I think it looks really, really cute. And so this is the brush that I'm going to use to create the doodles. Next up we have our heart with that little banner, and I find it easier to start with the heart. So I'm going to draw the heart shape first, and then I'm going to create a new layer and draw that banner on top, and then we can just erase the parts of the heart that we don't want anymore. And then on that new layer, I thought it would be cute to write love in here as well. So we can use a little bit of an extended script, for example. And I'm also going to use the love letters brush for this here as well. And then next up, we're going to paint our little roses here. And I think the easiest way to draw these roses is to actually create a little rose first. And then we're going to create the stems and also the little leaves here. And then for our bunch of roses here, we're going to do exactly the same thing. We're going to create the little roses exactly the way we've done them. For the single ones, we're going to draw all these little petals. And so now all these doodles look really, really cute already, but we can make it even better. So now we're going to add some little white and gold elements as well. And I recommend that you do this below all your doodle layers so they go in the background. So just above your letters, add a new layer and then select the white color. And now we're going to use the textured leaves brush to paint in some white highlights. And you don't have to be too precise with this. Even if there's a little bit that goes outside the line, that's actually not too bad. It looks quite cute even if you do that. It's just some splash of color. And then we're going to use that gold color as well, which comes as part of the palette. And this of course makes it look extra special. I really love the combination of pink and gold. But you want to make sure that you're not overusing it too much. For example here, I think it looks really cute if we use the gold for the roses, but I wouldn't use it for the whole bunch because then it overpowers it and it loses the effect a little bit. And then the same for our heart here. It wouldn't look very nice if we painted everything gold. So now I thought it would be nice to paint the banner white. And then we're going to make the heart gold. And you can see here now how the gold really, really stands out against the burgundy background and makes it look very, very beautiful. But again, we don't want to overdo it with the gold, so I'm going to add some white highlights here as well for these little bubbles. I think they look a little bit nicer if they're white. I almost feel like the letters are not standing out enough, so let's see what we can do about that. We're going to go back to our layers panel and we're going to merge all the layers with the letters together, and we're going to duplicate this layer so that we can create a shadow. On the bottom layer with your letters, alpha lock the layer and then fill it with black and then unlock it again. And now we're going to use that Gaussian blur function to create that shadow. So we're going to tap on Gaussian blur and now we're going to add a little bit of blur, and you don't want to blur it too much. I think 10% is a good setting. And now we're going to move this shadow a little bit to the bottom right like this, and you can see how the shadow is really intense now. So this is a bit too much. So now we're going to go back to our layers panel and then we're going to decrease the opacity, and I recommend that you turn it all the way off and then you start from nothing and then you decide how much shadow you want to add on. And you'll see it doesn't need a lot of shadow. I've set it to 38% now and it's really nice and subtle in all these areas. So you wouldn't want to start at the top and then turn it back because the shadow will be too intense. So I always recommend that you turn it all the way off and then you gradually start adding the shadow here. And there you have it. This is our Valentine's greeting card with watercolors and doodles and then also some golden accent. I really hope you've enjoyed this tutorial. Give me a thumbs up if you did. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. And then I'm also going to pop up another couple of videos with more watercolor doodles so that you can keep watching and you can keep learning. Thank you so much for watching and I'll see you in my next video.